welcome back to another episode of the Interjections podcast. We've been doing something called the Undiscovered Decade, where we look back at all the movies from the 1990s, and we've been taking it month by month. And this month we're going through June 1990, and we're looking at a very colorful film, one that I did not expect to be as bright. But there is a good reason for that. Warren Beatty, the director and star, had a particular penchant for detail, and he was looking at making the film Dick Tracy, finally adapting the comic for the big screen. So we want to start off with like thoughts. I mean, I have the plot to go through. We could just start from the beginning.
Yeah, I remember seeing this in the theater, and this was like kind of couched in with seemed to be a trend that they were before. Now superhero movies are being adapted at an alarming rate, but back then it seemed to be mostly period piece comic book movies because you had this, you had the Phantom, and you had the Shadow.
Yeah,
kind of around the mid '90s.
Yeah, I was gonna say even Darkman seemed like in that trend.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know if that was actually a comic beforehand.
I don't think it was. I think that's an original IP.
Yeah, I mean, it could have been inspired by those source materials.
Yeah,
it definitely was. Yeah, you can tell it's very film noirish, and so is this. A lot of the silhouettes and everything in this movie, you can tell were probably taken from a lot of Humphrey Bogart movies from that time period that it's set.
Mm-hmm.
But for people who don't know about Dick Tracy, the comic, it started in the 1930s, and it was a series of detective stories. And he famously wore the yellow jacket and fedora. And
no monkey, though.
No monkey. No Curious George. But
yeah, I kept thinking that throughout the movie. I'm like, it's weird that they don't reference each other.
But it's funny that you brought up the fact that Warren Beatty's kind of painstaking attention to detail, because he is kind of known in the industry as a perfectionist, and you can tell with every frame of this movie. Every frame of this movie is dazzling. There's a lot of, in fact, there's a great composite shot towards the beginning where they push in on Big Boy Caprice's club.
Yeah,
and it's clearly it's a live action shot within a matte painting. But it looks amazing. It's seamless.
Oh yeah, no, like I was wowed by it, and like I even like mentioned to Tristan, like holy crap, it like looks so much better than any CG crap that we got going on today.
Right off the bat.
Yeah. It was just like kind of just like wow-tacular.
Yeah.
Right.
Apparently it was before CGI started taking over those sort of things, and that's why it has that realistic look, because it takes longer to do that, and he was willing to take the time.
So, and it was like one of the last
painting like
blockbuster movies to have a background just as a painting, I guess matte painting, other than throwing in CGI. But as far as like the color scheme alone, to go with the noir, like all of the villains and everything are these primary colors, just based on those were the colors that were available when the comic strip was being printed. Yeah. So like that level of detail.
Yeah, so you basically have the six main colors, yellow, red, blue, green, purple, orange. So
there's definitely,
and on top of that, in terms of the villains, the makeup for each of the villains is very distinctive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like obviously that Big Boy is played by Al Pacino once you hear his voice and the bellowing, but the makeup to make him look like that is terrific. Everybody has a kind of like a Abe Hirschfeld caricature look to them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
like especially like characters, like even ancillary characters like Littleface and Prune Face.
Yeah,
but this is like peak Pacino right here.
Yeah,
like this has got to be the angriest I've ever seen him in any movie.
The funniest thing is we started when he first appears. And actually, particularly when he rounds up all the other villains, it reminded me of his performance in The Irishman, which he does 30 years later. just trying to unionize, and he's very aggressive, and there's just a charisma about him despite his anger. It is peak Pacino.
Yeah. I wonder if he still has that prosthetic kicking around, because he actually designed his own makeup for that. Like all
I
of
didn't know
them.
that.
Yeah, all the villains, like everything else was based on exactly how the characters looked in the comic strip, except for Big Boy's makeup. It was apparently like
It's supposed
he
to
was
be
this
big.
big fat guy with a tiny little nose, and Pacino just went the opposite direction, but it still worked because it was still like he still has that cartoony, over exaggerated features, but it gave him the ability to do his Pacino thing,
More emotion.
not hide,
in
right.
his
It
face.
was more, you could be more expressive with that.
I think
Well,
the
it's funny
person that
'cause-
looks the most like their comic book counterpart is Flat Top.
Oh yeah,
Mhm.
Flat Top is uncanny.
And that's
Flat
William
Top.
Forsythe, right?
William Forsythe, yeah. And I don't know. I mean, even beneath that makeup, you wouldn't recognize him.
hmm
He's completely a chameleon under that makeup.
Yeah, I immediately had to look up who it was because I had no idea. I recognized other people, obviously, but
I think in terms of casting, it was really smart. I know it's kind of a vanity project in a way, but it was smart for Warren Beatty to cast himself in the lead, because you kind of need somebody who's a little, I don't want to say bland, but a little more colorless and square to hold the movie and ground it.
yeah. I mean, there are so many things just about that. Apparently, this movie had been tried to be made countless times,
Yeah, I mean,
including because Chester Gould, the guy that created the comic, had all these ideas to make it into a movie, like right after the '66 Batman came out, but his demands were so ridiculous for the time that they're like, we're just gonna shelve this for right now. And apparently, after he died, his family and the estate had slightly less crazy demands, and so then they actually it got back into production. But the thing with Warren Beatty was the producers asked him to direct, but he would only do it if he could play Tracy. And apparently they just did that because they couldn't find anyone else.
I honestly can't think of anybody else playing it.
Right,
There
I know.
were the normal rumors of like Harrison Ford and Mel Gibson, like the big stars of the day.
Oh,
but no one really signed up.
I don't think they would have. I could see Harrison Ford maybe, but I don't think Mel Gibson would have worked in that time period.
No, but it's fascinating because just to see how many other classic movies were made just because nobody wanted to work with Warren Beatty.
Yeah.
Like Macaulay Culkin turned down the role of the kid in order to do Home Alone. And Scorsese was offered to direct, but he was like, no, I'm going to do Goodfellas instead.
Yeah. How crazy is that?
And Tim Burton was already in production for Edward Scissorhands, so he couldn't do it. And it was this weird runoff that you wouldn't.
And it's still
would have been a good movie.
Pretty good film. Like it's not like everyone. It's not like it was poison for crew.
It was just a weird scenario because it wasn't a bad movie. It was just a weird backstory thing.
Yeah. It was funny. Jimmy and I ourselves thought who would be a good Dick Tracy if this had been made closer to the actual creation of the comic. And given that he pops up pretty close to the beginning, Dick Van Dyke playing the DA, we're like, what if he had wanted to be Dick Tracy back when he was making his TV shows and he had the chance to do this finally? He's like, I'll take a minor character. I'll be in this just because I love Dick Tracy. Like it seemed like all the guys like Dick Tracy that were in it, James Caan, etc. But I feel like he would have been a good square detective. That was useful.
I feel, and also it's Dick Van Dyke. He would have added a little humorous charm that's just typically Dick Van Dyke.
Yeah, he's a little
Yeah.
wry, but he's a goofball. So it
I
would
liked how they
fun.
even deconstructed his screen persona, because you're like, oh, Dick Van Dyke, he's unimpeachable. He's Dick Van Dyke. He wouldn't
Yeah.
play a villain, and yet they cast him as a villain in this.
Yeah, and not even like a cartoonish one, just like he's corrupted by
Right.
Yeah.
the system. So
I have to say, even though I know it's nepotism because they were dating at the time, I think Madonna's songs are really catchy.
Yeah.
did you know that the song Vogue came from the Dick Tracy soundtrack, technically?
Really?
Yeah, it's just an extra song on top of all the songs she worked on with Sondheim to create the ones in the actual movie. Just Vogue's attached to it, so there was no other place at first that it existed. It
Yeah.
later was in like collections of Madonna songs, but I didn't know that
Yeah.
until I didn't even know there was a soundtrack that was mainly her. I don't think I even knew.
Yeah,
it was
and her acting was actually really good too. Like that was what was surprising.
Yeah.
But going back to the music, Stephen Sondheim was attached to this to write like 5 songs for the movie, which was also unexpected. Like the hot shots that were involved in this movie were insane.
Yeah, and it's just not talked about anymore, which is the
Right.
crazy thing. Like any Broadway fan that likes Sondheim don't really bring up Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
Any fan of Warren Beatty's work is always Reds. Madonna is League of Their Own. Who else is there? William Forsythe was kind of unknown at first, but Pacino is Godfather.
Yeah.
So-
Well, Pacino also did this, like, he had a pseudonym at first when he was doing
Really?
this. Yeah, he was like, I forget what the actual what the name was that he used, but it was like some ridiculous Italian name because he just didn't want, like, he wanted to be involved, but he didn't want to be typecast as that or whatever.
Mhm.
So he just
I
wanted
guess
to
maybe he
be-
was worried they put his name above the title.
Speaking of heavy hitters, Vittorio Storaro was the cinematographer, and he's coming off of a string of hits. And then Milena Canonero, who'd done tons of Oscar-winning films, was doing the costume. So all the monochrome stuff was done by some of the best in the business. And it's just, you would never expect like this of all things to be what they work on next,
Yeah.
I get it looks like Warren Beatty called in a lot of favors with a lot of his acting friends, because even in the fringes, if Jeff moved his head a little bit to the right or left, the person sitting at the head of the table there is James Caan in a cameo. I don't think he's even billed.
I don't think so.
And Mumbles is played by Dustin Hoffman. Kathy
Yeah.
Bates shows up as a receptionist at the police station.
Yeah, Catherine O'Hara is in this scene too, right on the corner of his frame. There's someone else big in here. Oh, speaking of Back to the Future from last month, James Tolkien is one of these guys.
Yep.
Paul Sorvino's in it.
Uh-huh.
Yep.
His lips manless.
Yep.
Paul Sorvino down in oysters like there's no tomorrow.
Right.
What a great role here.
Right.
Here, come eat some food and then get whacked.
Yeah, this is such a, I don't know. This is definitely like a comic, because there's comic book movies and there's comic strip movies. And this is like, this felt like golden age comics in real life. Like everything else is just like these darker, grittier takes on characters. And this is clearly like
Well,
a 5-year-old from 1930 made this movie.
well, the movies that are coming out now, they've figured out a formula on how to make them. So like
Right.
they know, they just know how to make them now.
Churn
Whereas
them out.
yeah, churn them out. Whereas this is like it's early 90s and then early comic book movies, like so like
Yeah.
they
Wild
kinda-
West of
yeah.
trying to figure out how to bring this to an audience.
So like
It's strange because this is like,
they're kind of just doing it.
this is kind of a kid's movie, but it does have some risque things in it. There's a lot of
Oh,
innuendos associated with Dick Tracy's name.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene with Madonna where she's wearing something very sheer that leaves nothing to the imagination at all, especially if you have a high definition TV.
All right.
But yet when I was a kid, it really appealed to me. In fact, I remember distinctly, I saw it in the theater. I loved it so much. I was so excited to go to Suncoast on the day of release. I couldn't wait to get out of soccer practice to go pick it up and watch it again. I loved it that much. I continue to love it.
I was when we were watching this again for the podcast, stuff was racing back to my memory, but I must have seen it when it first came to TV, but then never again. So it was like buried deep in my psyche. I'm like, oh right, Dustin Hoffman, okay.
Yeah.
And like all the colors, the boardroom scene, and I'm like, the one weird thing is I didn't remember the kid at all. I just remembered like Madonna singing and Pacino being campy, and didn't remember Charlie Korsman in any way.
Newsies, origins.
Yeah.
Like it was, I had never seen this movie at all. So like when this was the first time I had seen it, was the podcast, and like it still holds up, but it was one of those things where like it was like no one talked about it, and
it was a big hit.
How many people were involved with that?
Yeah. It did fun too.
It made over 100 million, and at the time, that was a lot of money.
Right, it was like Warren Beatty's biggest blockbuster.
Yeah, and then it just kind of got buried. Pacino even says in interviews, he's like, I don't know why it's not more beloved. Like, I really enjoyed making the movie, and now no one even remembers that I was in it.
Yeah.
Maybe it just got like overshadowed by like everything else that came out.
Yeah, I mean, he wins his Oscar a couple movies later, and Beatty kind of would take time in between films. Madonna has her music career, so that overshadowed it. So,
yeah. I feel like this is one of those movies that like they could make into a musical and it would work.
There's a lot of montage scenes.
Yeah.
Like when Dick Tracy's in jail and they go on the crime spree.
Yeah. Oh, the montage.
Yeah, so it's got more montages than Rocky IV. But they definitely have a lot of sequences just set to the music.
Yeah. So
it could easily translate to a Broadway play.
Yeah, I'm surprised Sondheim didn't try to do that. I wonder if their intention was to eventually bring it to Broadway, and just that kind of flopped after. Who knows what happened? I didn't see anything come up on information.
Well, you gotta think of like how experimental theater was in the 90s anyway, because after doing something like this, the reason I say that was because a lot of it reminded me of the Spider-Man musical that happened. Like specifically all of the characters of the villains. Like I could just see some weird ballet happening with all of these goons just running through trying to knock off Dick Tracy, and this Batman in a Burberry coat just punching everyone out.
Flat Top's mournful ballad,
right,
about how he's misunderstood.
Big Boy's soliloquy.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing is the ballad
of Big Boy Caprice.
I don't know. Well, funnily enough, I don't know if they could even do that, because I think that Warren Beatty still retains the rights, just because he produced a semi-sequel / TV special in 2008, I believe, or 2011, something like that, where he got Leonard Maltin, the film critic, to interview himself as Dick Tracy. And it was all just a ploy. They only had to air it once, but in order to do that, he could retain the rights to producing any further Dick Tracy spin-offs. Because I guess he always envisioned doing a sequel.
Yeah.
Which still hasn't come to fruition 30 years later, so he keeps talking about it.
He was even saying it during his last film, Rules Don't Apply. Like, I just don't want to do it. And he's like 80-something now.
And,
I don't think he could be in it. He could produce it maybe, but it probably has to be a new actor.
He could be Prune Face.
I mean, even though he dies in the film, Dick Van Dyke could come back technically.
Yeah.
No, you know who would be a great Dick Tracy if they did it now?
Oh yeah,
Patrick Warburton.
Patrick Warburton. Yeah.
I could see it.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's got that noir voice and feel to him. Like he's got the square jaw. He's got like the whole thing going on.
John Hamm, maybe.
John,
John Hamm would be good, yeah.
ooh,
Yeah. Didn't Warburton do a noir film? That was kind of like,
I think
The
that's
Woman
why
Chaser.
it's coming to mind.
yeah, The Woman Chaser. Yeah. So he could pull it off. I think Ham would be great though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They,
I mean, he's already got the 50s and 60s vibe down. So
Right,
like,
yeah.
Go,
Everyone's
go back
thinking
a
of
couple more decades, get the 30s vibe.
Now I want a John Hamm, Dick Tracy.
Yeah.
oh my god.
Do you guys have a favorite shot in the movie? Because I have one.
Let me think
There's
of this.
Any of the ones where he's like, he's got the silhouette thing and it looks like the poster, like it looks like a cartoon.
Uh-huh.
I was thinking in particular the scene where Big Boy goes to meet Dick Van Dyke in the cemetery,
Graveyard, yeah.
and that
that's-
perspective shot.
Yeah. I know it's kind of simple, but the first thing that popped to mind was the last shot because I loved how they designed that bridge because that's half like the beginning where the matte painting and the live action is sitting in the doorway of the bridge. So it just
Yeah, those are a neat way to
bookends
cover it
really
too.
well.
Yeah.
How did you did you guys know we didn't really go through the plot, but basically it's your traditional noir. He takes on a case because there's villains abounding. It's kind of like Batman, so all these goons that are behind Jeff are running rampant around the city, so he's trying to stop them. But in between all the casework, Madonna is trying to seduce him as well, and he's also trying, we didn't talk about her at all, his true love, Tess Trueheart, is trying to get him to settle down, but he's too married to his work.
I don't think she's trying to get him to settle
well,
down.
I don't
She's
know
just like
what she
trying to
wants.
convince him to take a desk job.
Yeah.
She also doesn't
very-
want him to
That's
cheat
totally
on her,
settling
which
down,
he
dude.
may be
Like-
doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she seems to be okay with him like being dedicated to his work. But she's just like, maybe it's like, okay, you're a little too dedicated. Maybe a little less dedication.
There was some
Ooh,
real go get 'em
right.
tiger energy coming
Yeah.
from her.
But we didn't talk about how special Glenn Headley is coming off of Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Yeah.
I didn't even remember she was in this. So she's underrated, I think, especially in
Yeah.
those films.
She's underutilized in this. But yeah, in Dirty Round Scoundrels, she's used a better effect.
Yeah.
But she's the long-suffering girlfriend, that cliche.
Yeah. My real question that I realized we should have gone through the plot, and I did so that we could get to this point. Did you all think about who the blank was? Like, did you see it becoming who it ended up being?
Oh,
I did
Surprised
not.
me when I was a kid.
Yeah.
I didn't see it.
I don't
coming.
remember my reaction from when I was a kid.
Mhm. I didn't remember.
But like because I since I seen it when I was a kid, like seeing it again, like I knew who Blankface was. Like just like there was no surprise. But I was a little I guess a little confused because like I expected more of a maybe a little build up as to like because but there wasn't any, like there was there was no like who's Blankface because the entire story was focused on dealing with the big guy.
I don't know.
I actually
I got that because it was like, because you have the whole thing happening between Dick Tracy and Big Boy, and then there's a subplot and like there's someone who's above Big Boy and is trying to sabotage everyone, and you're like, so I throughout most of the movie I'm like, all right, who is this? But I didn't see it coming.
Yeah, I didn't really see it coming because I didn't think like, who is this? I did,
but
the
also
opposite of what you did.
Knowing that the character designs and everything, I just thought that it was a guy with no face. Like I genuinely thought that it was
Right, yeah. As a
another
kid, I just thought that was
weird-
just another character from that rogues gallery.
Yeah, I
Right,
didn't expect it to be someone we knew.
I didn't think it was a disguise, in other words.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. And that's kind of why it threw me. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah,
And
so
also-
it surprised me, but I'm like, oh, that makes sense. Sure, whatever.
Yeah. And also the voice just like it hurt. Listening to that, I was like, I felt like I was being strangled.
Mm.
I don't know
Sounded
why.
like a cancer kazoo.
Right. Yeah, oh, God.
It was
Yeah.
Ned from South Park.
I briefly mentioned him, but Charlie Kortman was actually good, despite me not remembering him from when I first saw it. Kid actors could be obnoxious, but I liked the part that he's just hungry all the time.
When do we eat?
And he's cute. And he's not like, he helps Tracy a bunch, and you believe that he would want to and can.
Yeah.
So
He's Robin
refreshing. Yeah.
as
Yeah.
an 8-year-old.
Yeah. Like a
Which is funny
legit-
because I was looking this up. I didn't know which came first, Batman or Dick Tracy. Apparently, Batman was heavily based on
right. Summer
Dick Tracy
before.
because it came out
like
8
the
years later.
comics.
Yeah, the comic.
Yeah, I mean, Batman started off in detective comics.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Right.
and the watch in particular would definitely be like a Batman gadget. I think
Yeah.
he's used. Actually, there's a few times in some of the later Batman movies, I believe, where he's doing a communique to Alfred via
Yeah.
like a watch of some
The
Yeah.
sort.
watch is definitely in the comics itself too.
There
For
was a lot
Batman.
of
Yeah, I mean,
There
then
was
it
a lot
slowly
borrowed.
evolved that he had a communication device in his car.
Yeah, or just
those-
in his
right.
cowl.
that's why it felt like
Yeah.
we're getting some real Schumacher era Batman vibes.
Yeah, and this was before like that garish, horrible lighting that Schumacher used in
Mhm.
his Batman movies before it became really sickening to look at.
Yeah. Well, I think with
that
those Schumacher ones, like it was 100% of the lighting just like being
Yeah,
that
the
way,
lighting and the
on top
colors
of like
being-
the sets. Whereas this in Dick Tracy, it was the sets and the costume design that gave it the color and flair, and they used like normal lighting.
Well,
So
no,
it,
there
seemed-
was
it came off more natural.
it was normal lighting, but with weird colors. Like
Yeah.
there wasn't a single like natural light in there.
Yeah. Luckily, there wasn't a lot of gels like magenta, green gels like
Mm.
there is in those Schumacher movies.
Yeah,
That's something we were saying right as we started. He was like, this 1930s an actual color
Yeah,
is
no,
happening.
I was surprised. Like, I mean, granted, it's a kids' family movie, so like it's going to be a little saturated. But like, I was taken back by the fact that like it takes place in the 30s, and like typically any movie that takes place in the 30s, they tone down the colors. They make it a little more muted, or make a little darker tone, give it a noir vibe, or like sepia tone. But this, like, it was just complete opposite. It was like, just saturate the hell out of it. And like, if you were to legitimately in real life somehow manage to go back in time and go to the 30s, no, in real life, it would be actually more or less that kind of brightness.
Yeah, the zoot suits and everything.
Yeah.
So
So like,
think it's all gray.
It's realistic in one regard, but like with our perception of what the 30s is, it seems cartoonish. But like, no, I thought about that for a good 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Right.
it's probably one of the most
actually-
appealing aspects of the movie because
Yeah.
the story is very run of the mill noir, but so it's a lot of eye candy.
Really,
Madonna not included.
yeah,
but-
really weird thing that I just thought of. My grandmother is like, well, she's been dead a while now, but like when she died, she was like close to 90. She was, I think, born in 1911, 1918.
Yeah.
1918.
she died.
She was born in 1918 because I remember this was the end of the First World War. 1917, 1918. And like she grew up around this era, and she had kept a lot of little trinkets and had like a lot of little things from the decades. And I think I vaguely remember her like a couple. I don't remember specific items, but I remember seeing like certain items, and then like just not thinking much of it. And then I see the set design for this movie. I'm like, oh, that reminds me of my grandmother, because like she probably had something from the 1930s just sitting in her room or in her drawer, and like, because she would like, whenever I would go talk, because we lived in the same house, whenever I would go talk to her, sometimes she'd be like, oh, I want to show you this. I'm like, all right, okay. And then she shows me that, and I'm like, that's pretty neat. It really is. So it was just like interesting for a personal perspective with the set design, like just like the little things, little details, and then like I had the experience of like holding and seeing these things, like no, it's just like
Yeah, it's
It's
like
a nice
a
little
lot
time.
of like
it is.
You see all these colorized photos, and you know, it's the same feeling as when you realize that no, the past wasn't totally in black and white. Like the past was just like now, but we can't physically see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
It actually won the Oscar for Best Art Direction and makeup, particularly obviously Pacino's. It was nominated for costumes and I believe cinematography.
yeah.
And the biggest thing was he was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for Al Pacino himself. Like, I guess they were trying to get him something, but I looked up what he had in order. He had 4 straight Best Actor nominations from in the middle of the 70s for Godfather and Dog Day Afternoon and stuff. But then there was a gap until right now. And then it seemed like they really wanted to try and finally get him his Oscar. So they gave it to this, and then Scent of a Woman, finally he won. So it's just interesting. You would never expect like this to get nominated for an Oscar. And it had the second most nominations that year.
Yeah, and I think this was him coming off of a hiatus that he took after that horrible movie Revolution, which was a huge box office bomb. Around the late 80s, Al Pacino, we don't think of it now, but back then he kind of hit a career slump. He had movies like that, Bobby Deerfield, Author, just
I don't know
a lot of dreck.
Yeah. I didn't know Revolution until I looked up what his Oscars were and saw that there was a gap at all. I was like, wait, I didn't even notice looking at his filmography all my life that he had a 5-year hiatus. So it's kind of like DiCaprio after winning his Oscar. He's just kind of disappeared. Oh, then he did Hollywood last year, and that wasn't a bad gap.
Right.
And the one other Oscar they won 3, which had the record for comic book films until Black Panther tied it. They won Best Original Song, which is how Stephen Sondheim is 1 award away from an EGOT. That's how he has his Oscar.
I believe it. Yeah, apparently he also he couldn't get it at the ceremony because he had a broken ankle. And so the rumor goes that they sent him a full-size chocolate Oscar statue with a broken leg.
That's funny.
But yeah, so that was a lot of unexpected hit points for this movie.
There's one other thing I noticed. Apparently there's a longer cut, which I don't know what they need to add to it, but apparently it ran for 2 hours, 15 minutes. And this is
the
an hour 45.
director's cut.
Yeah, so I'm wondering what would be in that. More tests, more
montages, probably.
Yeah, 5 more Sondheim.
Vogue.
Yeah, there you go.
More Madonna.
Yeah. The choreography was pretty good too, despite probably being actual Broadway performers. They had to look like they didn't know what they were doing. So that's even more impressive, to try and look like you don't dance.
Even Mandy Patinkin's good at pantomiming playing the piano.
That was the other one. My God. Mandy Patinkin, who's he's an important character. I don't know how he just totally.
He's got the best obnoxious laugh in the movie too.
Oh yeah. And that didn't show up till later on in the movie. You thought he was just a quiet dude, and then it turns out he's a dirtbag. But then you hear him laugh, and you're just like, oh, you're just a weird dirtbag.
You're just like the rest of them.
It was like, wow.
Yeah, that might be the most integral character, because he looks like Dick Van Dyke, as innocent as they come, but he's just
he's just bad.
Yeah. I think I forgot him because I didn't, he's so
But if you're just a piano player in the club and you're just some schlep your whole life, and then all of a sudden some no-faced person's like, hey, I got a deal for you, and you're gonna make a lot of money. You're gonna be a crooked fella real quick.
Yeah.
And then finally you're sitting at the table with the big boys. You're gonna try to put your best laugh on, but then your real laugh comes out, but you don't care.
Very weaselly.
With the big boys and making that good money.
Okay.
Yeah. Does he die at the shootout in the end?
I think so. I think it's before the bridge. I don't think he dies when Forsyth gets shot up at the cars, but he might. I forget.
It's pushed off a building or something.
Yeah, I don't know where 88
There were a
came
lot of
from.
people pushed off of stuff toward the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Like that was just their quick like solution to everything. Let's just push
Yeah,
them off the
everyone's
edge.
just gone.
The ending is kind of similar to Batman in a way. It's all somebody falls from a great height. The main villain.
It's true.
Although
Well, it
the
was a
puppet in
kid's
this
movie, so
looked
you
a
can't
lot
see-
better than that digital sketch of whatever Jack Nicholson was when he fell.
Oh,
Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I guess we pretty much went through it. Do you have any final thoughts?
It's a childhood favorite of mine. I'm glad we got to talk about it. I've always loved it.
Mm-hmm.
There's not much more I can say. It's a weird outlier in Warren Beatty's filmography. He hasn't done a lot of very flamboyant looking movies like this. Like you said, Reds.
Mm-hmm.
You wouldn't think this was the same director, but it just shows how versatile he is.
Mm-hmm.
You know?
yeah, it's Batman in a yellow trench coat. You know,
Or where's
I
Batman
enjoy-
Dick Tracy in a black cape?
right, exactly. Well, for someone who didn't know which one came first when watching the movie, it was
Right.
I got the same vibe, which is good. But I enjoyed it, and you know, it was the amount of star power in this was definitely, you know, not expected, but like it's a gem.
I think it's ripe for a reboot for sure. Because you could have something that balances out all this dark Robert Pattinson Batman bullshit. So
A
we
six-part
look-
Netflix.
as much as I'm looking forward to it,
Yeah.
I want something as colorful as Behind Jeff.
Yeah.
So
We need some Technicolor vampires,
yeah.
which is how I
you know,
when I was writing my notes. So that's how I described Madonna's character. It was like a Technicolor vampire.
And William Forsythe's in
Yeah,
it.
so like you could legitimately be like, hey, let's get the people who worked on Boardwalk Empire and have them work on this, and then just like boom.
Yeah.
Or maybe not
Well,
even
there-
like have just enough
Right.
people who worked on it, and then they're like,
There's how Scorsese got to do Dick Tracy. He just has Nucky instead.
yeah.
Steve Buscemi as Big Boy.
Yeah. The one thing I was thinking as this was going on, about a half an hour in, I was like, I'm surprised this wasn't the thing that I got a tattoo of. I have a Rocketeer on my shoulder, and that was the first film I saw in theaters, which was only like a year later. So this is one of your favorites because it probably was one of the first things you saw in theater, Corey.
Yeah.
And so if I had been a little bit older, maybe this would be like the thing I'm obsessed with instead of the Rocketeer. I could easily see that same kind of vibes.
It's
It was
when I
also
a
Disney,
kid,
right? I mean, this was supposed to be Disney, but then they gave it to Touchstone.
It's
But-
Touchstone, so
Yeah.
it's Disney.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, when I was a
Touchstone
kid,
PG-13
growing up,
movies.
I had 2 T-shirts that my mom got me that I would use as like pajama shirts, essentially. But like they were like medium or large, so meant for a bigger kid. So like it was kind of like for a little 4 or 5-year-old, it was kind of like more like a pajama gown.
Mhm.
And the 2 shirts that I had was one with Ghostbusters, had the Ghostbusters logo, but they changed the ghost inside of it, so it looked more like Slimer, but it wasn't Slimer. It was just kind of like that weird design thing.
The white one.
But then the second shirt I had was Dick Tracy.
Nice.
And get this, over the years, the Ghostbusters shirt got like ripped and tattered and just like worn out and just it died. I kept it till like maybe either late high school, mid college, but then like I got to the point where like I had to trash it. But my Dick Tracy shirt that lasted till like I'm 33 now. It lasted till I was like 25, 26.
Mhm.
Until like it finally started ripping apart. Like that was like, yeah, no, this is it. It's like it's goodbye. So like knowing that I've seen the movie so many, like probably a handful of times as a kid. So like on television, blah blah blah, yada yada yada. But like what stuck with me was like the physical like T-shirt that I had.
The merch.
So
Was
yeah,
it-
the merch. So like so like, and I never really remember the movie all that well because again saw it when I was a really young kid. But like I had the merch, and you know, I kind of
Yeah.
watching this movie brought back other memories. So just like, oh yeah,
Cool.
cool.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
it
this-
wasn't
I
just
mean-
like the movie for me. It's kind of
Yeah.
a little more.
Yeah, this whole thing, the undiscovered decade stuff, is just reminding me of my childhood. So
Yeah.
it is a lot of fun to go back and see how we felt.
Yeah. The thing with the merch was like I remember as a kid like not knowing that Dick Tracy was a movie or a comic book. I thought it was like a brand, like the and one and whatever, but it was just like a dude in a detective outfit. Because I saw people with T-shirts all the time, but it was always like silhouetted guy with like you couldn't make out any facial features, so I had no idea what it was. And going back to the T-shirt thing real quick, apparently the world premiere, they didn't have actual ticket stubs. Like you could only go if they gave out T-shirts that had a giant ticket with the Dick Tracy logo and just said admit one, and that was how you got into the premiere.
Like a
So you had to have
midnight
that T-shirt
thing.
God, I gotta go on eBay and find one of those.
Right. Well, they've started reprinting them now too.
Oh, cool.
But to find an original one would be awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sure it's probably in good shape given to, like what Jimmy said about the quality of those articles of clothing.
If they're anything like Jimmy's shirt.
Yeah, no,
as
it
long as they
lasted
were
a long
worn
time.
a lot.
Yeah.
And it's weird, like if I still had it and I showed it to you right now,
I remember it.
yeah, you'd feel how thin it had gotten over the years, because like it get like going through the wash and dryer so many times, it like getting stretched out, because and also like a little kid inside of a big T-shirt going to bed, of course he's gonna be wily and just cracked out on sugar and like so like I would just like take the shirt and like tuck my knees into it all the time, or like or even when I'm like watching a movie like Jurassic Park 100,000 times, like I just sit there and like tuck myself inside the shirt because it was so big on me. And yeah, no, like if I still had it again, like you'd feel how thin it was, and like it lasted quite a while.
In other words, this podcast is regression therapy for Jimmy.
Yeah. God.
For all of us, really, but I'm glad something's helping.
Like last night, Tristan and I were talking, and what did we see last night?
We didn't watch anything last night.
Oh no, we just
We're at a bachelor party.
Yeah, we were at a bachelor party. However it came up, I was telling him like, yeah, however it came up, I was telling him how like the 1990s for us would be like the equivalent of like the boomers 1950s.
Yeah, which is like Warren Beatty looking back to the 30s.
Yeah.
Right.
Like the prosperous era, the economy was booming. There was peace. Like there was no big fear of war.
Well, that's
like,
why in the 50s
had a lot of bit of the Cold War and nuclear war anxiety, but like we weren't in like actual traditional war.
Yeah, well, look, this is when they were signing the peace treaty to put Germany back together.
Well, weirdly enough, that's why like the directors in the 30s and 40s were doing westerns. They were looking back
to the 1880s.
Yeah,
this is the Midnight in Paris.
So everybody, I feel like everybody has that golden age thinking of 30 years before. It always seems to be 30 years.
I love the 70s, even though it's kind of dirty. Like I love stuff like French Connection or Alien, just because that's what cinema was. I think that's the perfect decade. But
which is interesting because like that would be our father's era growing up. So like that would be obviously like where a clear influence on us growing up, because they would like tune in to it on television or they rent it from Blockbuster or something. And it's like, yeah, no, I grew up watching this when I was young or teenager. And you sit there and like, oh, okay, this must be a good movie. And you watch it and then like you get enamored by it. And it's like, yeah, thanks, Pops.
Well, for George Lucas, what was Star Wars? It was Buck Rogers.
Yeah, exactly.
What was Raiders of the Lost Ark? It was the serials from the 40s when they were going to the movies and they would show them before the feature.
Yeah. It is fun. I've been telling Dad about what we're watching, like what our focus is, and he'll like, where did I see that? So it's actually kind of like nostalgic for him as well. Just bringing it up.
It's weird because I keep ticket stubs. I think you know this. I keep ticket stubs from when I was going to the movies. Not this far back.
I didn't start until
in my teenage years. I started keeping ticket stubs, and every time I look at it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember when and where I saw that, what time of day, and everything.
I mean, I could tell you which theater I saw Rocketeer in. I definitely saw this on TV though. So,
I think we all loved it, right?
Yeah, I was thinking as we were gonna set up this morning that I didn't like it as much as you guys, but talking about it, it's a fun movie anyway. Like if anything, I'd say Madonna's advances. You know he's gonna end up with Tess, so that kind of dragged it down for me. I was just like, you're fighting a losing battle. So maybe one less scene of that, but I mean that's nitpicking at this point. So
It was like Casablanca for kids.
yeah, I think I liked it in the end. Just talking
With
about
nip slips.
it.